Hello and welcome to Stork'd, the podcast in which we explore the many ways to build and define family. This is your host, Julia, and today I am so excited to introduce you to Tracy Weiss. Tracy Weiss takes life pivots and turns them into an elevated, ebullient, joyful art form. What happened is Tracy was diagnosed with the big C, with cancer. And as a result, she had to go through both a cancer treatment process and a fertility preservation process, and then a fertility journey. Ultimately, you'll hear Tracy has determined that having kids is not in her future. So there's a lot of really interesting pivot points and decision points in Tracy's story, and she tells them so remarkably. This is 100% a must listen. But also what's really interesting is that Tracy takes her experiences and uses them to transform the lives of others through an organization called the Chick Mission. The Chick Mission has two branches. One is to provide fertility preservation financing for people with cancer. And what that means is if you're diagnosed with cancer, you have a very short window of time in which to seek treatment to preserve your fertility. And as we all know, that can be extremely expensive and it's not always covered by insurance. Isn't it astounding that insurance wouldn't cover fertility preservation when you've been diagnosed with cancer? And so for many people, you just don't have the financial resources in your back pocket, those tens of thousands of dollars to just throw at a fertility treatment plan. And so Chick Mission has some financing programs to support people, but it also has an advocacy branch in which they're working to change politics and policies so that insurance providers are state mandated to provide people who have cancer access to fertility preservation and fertility treatment options. This is really, really important. So here's Tracy. It's a must listen. Highly recommend the episode. If you love it as much as I do, and I'm sure you will, don't forget to subscribe to the Stork'd newsletter, subscribe to podcasts wherever you listen to them, share it with a friend. You never know who will need to hear this story, and give us an awesome review wherever you listen to podcasts. Here's Tracy. Tracy, welcome to Stork'd, the podcast in which we explore the many ways to build and define family. You said it just before we started recording. This has been a long time coming. I am so thrilled that we finally get to have a conversation that we get to record for others. So why don't we start by taking a little introduction? Who is Tracy Weiss?
Tracy Weiss is complicated. I'm a lot of things. I am an expat Midwesterner who came to the East Coast about 20 years ago. I am a sister. I am an aunt to more children than are related to me by blood. I am a very loud Broadway singer, and I have a great head of hair.
You know what? I'm looking at it's like red and gorgeous. Are you naturally red?
I'm definitely like a strawberry ash blonde. Dyed her a little darker, which I've actually never admitted out loud.
There you go. We get the inside scoop before we've even really dove into anything. So you're bringing this fiery spirit to all things, Tracy, including this podcast conversation. And we're here to talk about your journey in navigating, it's really a fertility journey, but it's a life journey in navigating the family that you currently have. You mentioned being an aunt to a number of children in your life. And to some extent, the life that you had maybe wanted or expected. And so let's start from the beginning. I don't want to lead too much. The way you and I met is through an organization called the Chick Mission, which supports women who are experiencing cancer to possibly preserve their fertility. And if that weren't enough, you have your own experience with building a family, navigating how that family changed, and fertility preservation.
My full-time gig and pretty much my entire life at this point is a nonprofit, the Chick Mission, that was founded by survivors as well as cancer supporters to change the landscape of women's health in a way where there's an end. What we want is for women to be able to make their own choices around preventative egg freezing before they start cancer treatment, and that their socioeconomic status shouldn't dictate that. Our goal is that insurance companies in all 50 states and federally mandate that insurance companies cover this for iatrogenic situations, meaning your infertility is a straight up side effect of chemo, radiation, surgery, or long-term drug therapy, which can kind of age you out of your natural reproductive window. We like to educate men, women, anyone who will listen about fertility 101. And then, of course, how it applies to the oncofertility experience. And in order to go out of business forever, we advocate state by state, talk to legislators, talk to senators, talk to constituents to help cancer patients and survivors have a voice in their government for what they need and want.
It's amazing. So you've got the legislative component. Let's change the laws. Let's ensure that the states and insurance companies are providing for this community, and the funding component, which is to support women and men to preserve their fertility in the case of cancer diagnosis. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so why don't we start at the beginning and start with what was going on in your life before cancer?
So before I had cancer, I was living what you would call the New York 20-something dream. I was newly married. I had a job in the media sector. I had just transitioned from being an associate producer from all of the salacious talk shows that you pretend not to watch to being a talent agent, kind of helping people start their careers and getting them on the path to be the best version of themselves. I spoke very quickly, very loudly, and in a very fast-paced life. I was traveling. I was a bridesmaid 13 times. I, surrounded myself with all the best things that Manhattan had to offer, the best food, the best wine, the best 17-hour walk through Central Park, and was really building a life that I was proud of. And from the autonomy it took to do so, to just kind of move to a new place, not knowing anyone, without a job, I was about 10 years into building this pyramid of greatness.
Oh my gosh, pyramid of greatness. That sounds like, honestly, it sounds like the way in which the movies and television shows intended the 20s to be, right? You watch Sex and the City, you watch Friends, you watch some of those things that were around in the 90s and early aughts. And that was like the depiction of living your best life, was running around the city, living to the fullest, going into great restaurants, having a career that somehow touched the arts. And I think as our culture has evolved, we've learned that may be some people's best life, but it may not be everyone's. Did it feel like your best life at the time? Did it feel like you were living your fullest potential? Were you happy?
Yeah, I grew up in a suburb of Metro Detroit where, at least in the early 1990s, it was about Coach handbags and SUVs, and homogeny, and standing out meant you were weird. And I was weird. I've been exactly like this from the minute I came into this world. I spoke too loudly, too quickly. I said the true things. I don't know if they're the right or wrong things. And I just felt really not comfortable in my skin, and I didn't know where I belonged. I did an internship summer in Los Angeles, did not belong there. Chicago, did not belong there. Boston for a year, felt a little bit better. And I had really never been to New York City. So I went, and I felt painfully average. Everyone was just like me, and if they weren't, they don't give an F in New York City. You want to cry too loud on the subway? Someone will hand you a tissue. You want to scream in Central Park? People will just be glad you're wearing pants. And I really, for the first time, became who I wanted to be.
It's amazing to find that person in your 20s. And I think so many of us can relate to, it's not necessarily being the big fish in the small pond or the average fish in the New York pond. It's sort of like, where do you feel comfortable as yourself? I don't know if you're spiritual at all, but there's this concept of astrocartography, which I've just learned about, which is basically doing astrology to determine where you should live based on who you are,
goodness.
where you.
I'm so into that. I'm not hyper spiritual, but I love astrology. And, I always used to say I was just born in the wrong place.
Amazing. So let's go back to this, I'm getting this texture of your life, and I'm almost seeing it in Sex and the City.
I wrote a book.
Did you?
I wrote a book about this. Yeah. I hadn't done anything with it yet, but I'm newly 30 years old. I'm sitting at my cubicle with the fluorescent lights shining down on my poorly made up face. And I've been having some really light health issues, but nothing to be overly worried about. Some vaginal bleeding. It would happen outside my cycle. And I was a rule follower. I went to get my physical every year. I went to the OBGYN once a year. I bought vitamins, but apparently you're supposed to take them. So that was a big fail. But, doctors to me are expert. They checked me and said I was fine. So I had to be. There was a specific incident that I referenced because it's just so visual. I was sitting at the office, feeling a little uncomfortable, went into the single stall restroom and was very seriously bleeding to the point where I couldn't leave the single stall. And people are pounding on it. It's gender neutral. Like everyone wants to know what's going on in there. And I am like horrified. I texted my assistant who like brought me some supplies and I went immediately to a friend's doctor.
Okay.
And I was like, hi, I'm having this problem. I don't know what this problem is. It happens, every couple months, but I'm throwing a birthday party at my apartment tonight. So like, I need to get in, I need to get out.
Like fix it.
I'm pretty sure I was answering emails on my BlackBerry in the stirrups. Like the total quintessential, like, I don't know who I thought I was. So I went home, I threw the birthday party. And then on Monday morning, the doctor called me in and said, hey, I need you to come down. I'm like, to the office? And she said, yeah. And I could not for the life of me figure out why. If I was married, if I was pregnant, wouldn't she just tell me in person? If I had some sort of, sexually transmitted disease, I would have known before I got married, unless there were shenanigans going on that I did not know about, which there were not. I honestly didn't really think to cancer because I was 30 years old, no history in my family other than the occasional, I live in Florida and have melanoma, and had been healthy my whole life. And I walked in her office and the doctor is very similar in age to me. And I could just tell by her face and just like, you have cancer. And I was like, yeah, like I'll get a LEAP procedure. Like I'll be fine. She was like, no, you have actual cancer.
Oh my gosh.
And
that's so interesting. So why don't you think it crossed your mind? Was it like, are we not taught about cancer enough? Was it just because you were living this full, beautiful, vibrant New York life and it wouldn't have crossed your mind? Or is there something culturally about like the way we talk about cancer for young women that it's not as present for us?
if you're a young woman, the only cancer that you're going to be affected by is breast cancer. That's just, I don't know why I thought that way. The only person in my life who had ever known with cancer was a high school girlfriend of mine who had osteosarcoma and died. So you either have breast cancer and you get biopsies and it's fine, or you have bone cancer and you die. That's like kind of my mindset of where I came in. Vaginal cancer, cervical cancer, uterine cancer. A, how do you even know you have that?
Right.
And B, there aren't outward symptoms. It's not something you can feel. You don't look sick. It's funny. It turned out the year prior, I was diagnosed with mono. I was just exhausted. Looking back, my white blood count was high. I had cancer. You wouldn't know. How would you know?
And a doctor diagnosed you with mono instead of cancer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's more likely that I had mono than cancer at 29 years old. Like, stop going out. You're tired.
Right.
Go home and go to sleep.
Take a break.
And honestly, family-wise, we talk about building a family a lot. I am someone who fits seamlessly. I call it other people's parents, other people's families. Just, I love it. I travel with my best friend and their best friends and their kids. I have another girlfriend whose dad offered to walk me down the aisle once when my dad was mad at me. I have an incredible brother. I have incredible cousins, but my family has been built with my lifelong friends. And I, until that moment, when the OBGYN told me I had cancer, didn't really know what I wanted to do about biological children. I was so involved in my career and I wanted to be further along in my career and in my sense of self before I wanted to be selfless, because I believe being a parent means that you have to be selfless in a lot of ways. And I wasn't ready to be selfless. And the minute the doctor said you had cancer,
it all switched.
I could see this little girl. I could see her tiny little Doc Martens. I could see my green eyes. I was going to name her Moxie. I don't really know why I'm in my head. And by the way, if you would have asked me before that second, I would have wanted to be a boy mom.
Right.
I don't want to raise me.
Oh my God. There's so much to unpack with everything you just said. But okay, so I want to stay in this moment. So you've given this news and your perspective around your future, in particular, your family building future just shifts.
Yeah. And it wasn't a full 180. It was almost like a window shade was drawn in a dark, comfortable, glamorous room, and just a little bit of light started to peek through. I didn't suddenly have, TikTok biological mom urges. I just almost like a shot to the chest. I saw a vision of this child.
Oh my gosh.
It was very both powerful and scary because I thought I knew myself. I don't want kids. I want to live my life. Like, I'll do it later. I want to travel. I want to go to Singapore, all these things. And
here's Moxie sitting on your heart in some way that you probably had never envisioned.
I mean, at 30, my girlfriends from the Midwest had probably 2 3-year-olds. I mean, I'm not a baby person. I like to huff their smelly heads and hand them back to their parents. It was an interesting look into myself that I reached up and closed the curtain shut. I could not think about that. I could not will this baby into being. I couldn't even admit that I saw her. I had to focus on not dying.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you talk about triaging your priorities, I think not dying has to be first and foremost for many of us, right? There's certain circumstances where you're just not able to be focused on that in the same way. But in the moment when you're given this diagnosis and you're starting to explore what that means for you and for your future, you started by saying that you have this big, robust, happy, textured family that is your friends and your husband and your brother, et cetera. Who's the first person you told about your cancer diagnosis?
Very good question. I'm pretty sure I texted my girlfriend, Marissa, who had made the appointment with her OBGYN. And I think that everything is funny. And I don't remember what I said, but it was so off color. I'll actually go back to the book I wrote and see what I wrote. I cribbed directly from the text, but I think I told her something really off-putting, like she should probably start making my Make-A-Wish list or call Jerry Lewis and start the telethon. That's how I deal with things. I thought it was funny. And for the record, she came over that night with breast cancer awareness cupcakes because it was October and she figured that was close enough.
Close enough.
So yeah. My friends are assholes just like me.
Here's some boobs on a cupcake, Yeah.
And I'm an awful human. A week and a half later, I was supposed to go to a wedding with my very best friend. Her name's Alicia. And Alicia she's not very emotional. She's kind of my perfect foil. And I wanted to tell her in person, which, by the way, is such a dick move.
So you waited until the wedding to tell her?
Before we were up and I told her, and she just all the color drained from her face. And she was like, I have to go to my law school reunion now. Okay. And I was like, okay. So she left. She rode around in the taxi cab for 45 minutes and then showed up to where I was eating dinner. But she needed the time. I wasn't trying to make a spectacle of her, but if we're talking about astrological, I'm a Cancer and I'm a caretaker. Yeah. And I was so worried what everyone else was going to feel, what everyone else was going to believe. And I felt guilty for worrying them and making them as upset as they were.
Oh, man. So on top of handling or on top of experiencing this momentous life-altering diagnosis, you are also worrying about the people in your life.
Well, and that was a way for me not to put the energy into my actual fear. Focus on letting my brother know I'm going to be okay. Focus on letting each one of my girlfriends know not only, what I need, but, how we're going to do this. And also, if you think about it, it's a very odd time to be a 30-year-old woman. Some of your friends have children. Mm-hmm. Some of your friends are trying to get pregnant. And my group of friends, everyone was at a different stage with that. In fact, jumping ahead, one of the girls came to help me post-surgery, which we'll get to. And we were watching The Office and Michael Scott was carrying a giant plate of hot dogs and she ran up in the bathroom and threw up. And I was like, are you seriously pregnant right now? And she's like, yeah, I am.
Oh, yeah. It's so I always joke that there's a certain stage in your life. Reminds me of being a 7th grade girl. I was a peer educator back in the day. And 7th grade is one of those really weird times where so many people haven't gotten their period yet. Some people are still playing with dolls. Some people are experimenting with drugs and sex. And you have to bring them together. And, if you're a teacher or peer educator or whatever, and talk about the hard stuff at all the different developmental stages. And your 30s are very much like that. Some people are focused on career. Some people are focused on family. Some are still finding themselves. Some are married. Some are not. It's a very funny time for sure.
And it's especially funny time because I don't want to date myself, but this was about 13 years ago. So there wasn't conversations about egg freezing in the New York Times. There wasn't people speaking about miscarriage. Infertility was a dirty little secret. And I am not known for being okay, being told what I can and can't do, and having the idea that I couldn't especially carry my own biological child, really messed with my head. Am I still a woman? Will my friends and family still love me if I'm childless? What will this mean for the rest of my life? Who will take care of me when I'm old? How am I supposed to use all this love in my heart if I can't pour it into a tiny thing? And I was embarrassed by those thoughts. I was supposed to be a tough as nails broad. I drank whiskey and, swore and, kind of was a badass. I'm not supposed to be, boo-hoo-hooing because I'm afraid that, I'm not going to be able to be a real woman, which, by the way, saying that now is offensive, but I panicked.
Yeah.
I just didn't know what to think. I didn't know anything. And to bring it back to the chick mission, no one mentioned to me that I was likely going to have to freeze my eggs. I had a couple of surgeries. I had a couple of biopsies to see if it had spread through my lymph nodes or my bowel. And then I was scheduled for a trachelectomy, which most people don't know is where they just remove your cervix, in which case you could potentially carry a pregnancy with an ironclad cerclage and, don't move for 9 months. At the time, the doctor I was seeing at Mount Sinai had done a couple. So I flipped to Sloan Kettering because that guy had done 30. But I went to sleep knowing that if it didn't work and I didn't have clear margins, that I would have a full hysterectomy. And that's what ended up happening. The interesting thing, it wasn't until 4 days before the surgery that the surgeon, Captain Cut, who's really only focused on saving your life, which he should be, that's his job, was like, oh, by the way, has anyone talked to you about preserving your fertility? I was like, I don't know what that means. And can I just do it after? And he was like, no, you could not just do it after.
If you don't have ovaries. So I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around how many doctors do you think you saw in this time period when you're actively managing this big diagnosis?
Well, we can start with the doctor who said I had mono, the female OBGYN who told me I was being hysterical when I used the word hemorrhaging about my bleeding, the OBGYN who actually listened to me, the head of oncology at Mount Sinai, another guy at Mount Sinai, the head of the department at Sloan Kettering, the doctor to do all the biopsies on the other parts, the surgeon, the radiation person, which I ended up not having. And then eventually I had a breast cancer scare and I met another doctor. So that's 12, maybe?
Yeah, I'm counting 12. And
a dozen. I love a dozen.
Right? A happy dozen or cheaper by the dozen or whatever the cute sayings are. But at least 10 of them are specifically treating a known cancer. And not one of them talked to you about, hey, this could impact your fertility in the future. Have you thought about that?
Nope. Again, it was a different time.
Sure.
I mean, I was a grown-ass woman who grew up in the time of right before the HPV vaccine. And I didn't know everything I needed to know about the cervix until mine had a glandular cancer.
Right.
That had started in the uterus and was unchecked and grew very slowly. I probably had it for a very long time through my cervix. And I wouldn't have found it if Marissa wasn't such a bully and didn't want me to bleed through white jeans at a birthday party. You know what I mean? And I have her to thank for it because she's a bully. She also signed me up to speak to the therapist I saw for 10 years too. She's like, I made an appointment for you. You're going at 11. And I was like, oh, okay.
We could all use friends like that. People who just show up for us in such, beautiful ways. Who don't just encourage or sit on the sidelines and watch you live your life, but actively say I think this is what you need to do.
And that's what I was saying in terms of family. I don't know if in a past life I, had it really, really hard, but in this life, there's lots of things I don't have. Hand-eye coordination, the ability to ski. I don't know where my car keys are, and I could not wrap a present if there was a gun to my head. But I have the best community that I honestly think at some point they should be card-carrying members of, some sort of unification or religion. People show up. My people show up. They say what they want to say. They mean it. They put their money where their mouth is. My people show up. You know how your reality you think is fact for everyone?
Yeah.
There's sometimes people can't see perspective other than their own.
Yeah.
I was shocked when I found out that every woman does not have a group of friends like mine. I just thought like you basically get standard issued them when you have to start wearing a bra. Like, I don't know what that's about. But
do you think you always appreciated your friends? I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. And that is that I've always been somebody who really cherished friendships and really invested in them. And yet, when I chose to go the solo parent route and was like really down the path, choosing the sperm donor, eventually pregnant, et cetera, that's when my community kind of rushed in and supported me in ways that I kind of knew they would, but even more so than I could ever have expected. Do you think the community was showing up just generally for you before the diagnosis, or did the diagnosis coalesce some of that presence in a new and different way?
Well, I also think you have to take into account the age that I was, because you think you're a grown up at 30, but you're not. My friends did show up for me, in high school. College was a little bit difficult because everyone's selfish in college, but we always had when the chips are down, you can call me.
Yeah.
If you are scared at 2 a.m. and I'm 5 hours away, I will show up. There are a lot of reasons for that I would love to talk about because it's my favorite topic, female friendships. But I think that cancer was the first time that I allowed myself to be vulnerable, to let them in the way I needed them. And that continued for the next 10 years of my life. When your friends or your family, you coalesce and you grow. And there's been other major events since cancer, and they've showed up. And I hope that the converse is true. Yeah. And that's not to discount that, my brother particularly is an incredible human being and my best friend. But it's hard to talk to your little brother about your vagina cancer. And B, he was like in law school.
Yeah.
You needed your girls.
Yeah. No, you need your girls around that stuff. There's certain things you need your girls around. Yeah.
I will tell you, my brother, who is afraid of everything medically, I am basically his mother. He came to New York right after my surgery, pushed me around the block in a desk chair.
Oh.
So we could go out and get some fresh air. Went and saw Avatar. And when the music started and like Dolby surround sound, I was so overwhelmed because I'd been inside for so long that I started to cry. And most people would be like, what's wrong with you? He just started laughing, which is exactly what I needed, and in the way, if you are lucky like me and you have enough friends, someone will always show up in the way that you need.
I love that. Exactly. It goes a little bit to dating where you just can't expect your partner to be everything for you. You need your community. You need the person who's going to make you laugh. You need the person who's going to be there to hold your hair when you've had too much to drink, or to, support you when you're crying, or, to push you around in an office chair and make sure you get the outside air that you need.
And I think that in terms of mothering, I think that's true too. In terms of whether you're fighting with infertility and you have the friend who has had pregnancy loss, or you've had the friend who's gone through IVF, or you have the friend who got pregnant naturally by looking at her husband, and each of them can offer you different experience from their own lives.
Yes.
And conversely, I have so many children in my life. I'm not a parent. That is not something that will happen for me. But I'm now an encyclopedia of children's ages new to 14. If you are having a problem, I know someone who's had it and I have a solution for you. And if I don't, I'll lie, say I do, and then tell you what I think you should do.
Couch the advice in other expertise. Okay, so let's talk about this word. I know I'm never going to have kids, because the last time we sort of left off in your story, your surgeon, I think you called him Dr. Cuts a lot or something like that.
Sir Cuts a lot.
Sir Cuts a lot. He, which reminds me of a 1980s rapper. So this 1980s rapper surgeon has offered you the idea of fertility preservation. Tell us about that. And that's also the work that you do with Chick Mission. Tell us about this fertility preservation concept, how it applied to you, and your journey from there, the conversation with the surgeon, to where we are now, where you say, I definitively am not going to have kids.
So, you don't really think about you need to go into a clinic for anything really. You think you're invincible at 30. I had no idea where to start. The OBGYN who found my cancer recommended 2 different practices. One of them looked too big and the other one was closer to my apartment. So I went to that one. I went in, we had the conversation, and I had to start the next day.
So there's no time to think about it. There's no time to like process it. You are go, go, go.
Yeah. And that's for me, that was my cancer experience in general. You get the test, you wait for the results. You get the other test, you wait for the results. You check things off your list. You keep moving forward, because if you stop and think about what's really happening, you will fall to pieces and you'll be in the fetal position and you will never get up. Down to, making sure there was like a fresh direct order in my apartment before I even went into surgery, all these things. So I'm at NYU. My husband at the time and I were the only 2 straight couple people, because this was in 2009 into 2010. It was a lot of single women. It was a lot of same-sex couples, but there was no one there who was doing fertility preservation, and there was no one there with a partner. They told us it would be like $17,000. And I, at that point, just laughed, because you're going to do it, you're not going to do it. You didn't choose to have cancer.
Yeah.
I didn't choose to spend this money. And I certainly didn't choose when the insurance company told me that this procedure would be elective, despite facing a hysterectomy.
It makes me so angry.
And I wish I told you that I got angry. I just gave up. NYU helped me apply for a program that the Chick Mission really looked at when we started our organization, called Fertile Hope. They got it down to like $9,000 from 17. And I went forward. Actually, the timing was, I had the meeting right before Christmas. I went and met my girlfriends for New Year's Eve. We woke up to a snowstorm on New Year's Day, and I had to be back in Manhattan on the 2nd to start my fertility treatment. And at one point I was like, well, if I gotta drive, I'll drive. Because they pushed my cancer surgery with enough time to let me do 1 round.
Got it. So your surgeon recommends fertility preservation. You push the cancer surgery. You discover that it's going to be outrageously expensive. And yet there's this glimmer of hope with this organization that can help you reduce the costs. And it's this magical, snowy New Year's Day just before you go in to get your fertility preserved. And you said that you did embryos. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So if you aren't familiar with the egg and embryo freezing process, I am now basically a doctor. In 2012, they perfected the process that allowed single eggs to be frozen and thawed. That is what many women with cancer do. That is what I recommend people do, because you never know where your life will take you. I, being treated in 2010, embryos had better freezability, I guess you could say.
So or thawability, right? It could freeze anything, but sometimes,
the whole process would work out better for me. And I was a newlywed, so why the heck not? I had 13 embryos. I have 6 eggs, 3 of them frozen the old way, and 3 of them frozen in the experimental way that became the practice in 2012.
Interesting.
I, of course, would need to use a surrogate in order to use my embryos. And, a lot of things happen after cancer. I spent a solid year just completely dumbfounded, because once you're okay, once you're healthy, quote unquote, you're then supposed to, have a big brass band and confetti because you're healed and like, hooray. But you do not know what the F just happened to you.
Are you expected to go back to your real life? Not your real life. Let me rephrase that.
Yeah, your real life.
Are you expected to go back to your old life?
Yeah.
And just live it as normal?
Especially then.
Yeah.
Especially, and I keep talking about it because I think that a lot has changed in the last 10 years. I took 6 weeks of medical leave. I went back to my job.
Wait, I'm sorry. You took 6 weeks of medical leave after having cancer and a major surgery.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was pressure both from work and from myself.
Sure. My jaw's on the floor right now, but okay.
Oh, also, I got diagnosed with cancer in October, and I went to work every day until January.
Okay.
And just didn't tell anyone.
Okay. Wow. There's, oh my God, there's so much about the way our office lives have changed post-pandemic. Right? How did it feel to re-enter your quote unquote old or quote unquote real life after this major thing?
The life I had worked so hard to build finding the right geography, finding the right kind of work. I felt like a fish out of water. I was self-conscious about, I didn't fit into any of my clothes because I had a lot of scar tissue and a lot of healing to do. I couldn't walk very well. It took me a while to get my bearings. And I did not care at all about what I'm going to call first world problems. Mm-hmm. You are a host on HGTV and you're in tears because you can't wear Hervé Leger on camera. You are a vegetarian and they've provided carb heavy food for you at lunch. I do not care. All the things that I used to just kind of joke off and like shark my way through, I did not care. I also don't know that my partner at work was very supportive. In fact, when I decided to leave 3 months after reentry, I told him that, I appreciate all the support and backing me up, during this really hard time, but I needed to build a different life, that this life didn't fit anymore. And he's like, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I think I'm going to write a book about my experience. I think that like what I went through, it would be able to help other people. He goes, why? It's not like you climbed Everest or anything.
What?
Which is the name of my book.
It's not like you climbed Everest or anything. Oh my God.
I know.
There's some people who just cannot, they're missing that empathy chip. They will never understand what you're going through or find it at all relatable. And that's just astounding to me.
So in the 10 years since then, a little bit more now, I kind of decided two things. One, I wanted to be there for every milestone for my friends and family. If a baby was born, I flew to, cook dinner and load the dishwasher the wrong way. If there was a wedding, I was there with actual bells on. If somebody's boyfriend broke up with them, I cooked lasagna and crawled into bed. Like I basically became a friend as my full-time job. And I had the luxury to do so, which so many people do not. But it made me feel so happy to show up for other people and care for them and be the person you call when there's drama or a crisis. In that, I also wanted to find career-wise what was going to fulfill me. And that proved to be a little bit difficult. And because I really enjoyed what I was doing before and knew I didn't want to do it post-cancer, a lot of the someday baby stuff became, I'll do this when I'm further along. I'll do this when I know what I'm going to do with my life. And what it really meant, I see now in hindsight, I'll do this when I believe in myself. I will have children when I know I can handle them and want to do it the way I'd want to do it. My eggs were forever 30. I thought I had forever. And something else that happens a lot after cancer and a lot in life is my partner at the time, he and I split up, and the flexibility you don't have with embryos, you have with eggs. An embryo has to be, owned, I guess, by two people. And our love story was over. And so was then our future family.
My understanding, having never gotten married, never had divorce, never frozen embryos, is that there's some legal complexities over who owns what, like anything, when a marriage ends. And that, for some people, that has an implication on whether or not you can pursue the fertility path you had initially planned. It sounds like that's one of the things that may have happened to you.
Yeah. And truthfully, I love my life, but I grieved being able to be a mother in the way that I always thought I'd be. I couldn't carry, I couldn't, get pregnant accidentally and giggle about it and just be so thrilled, oh, we'll name her Paris because she was conceived in Paris. As if having babies is that simple.
God, wouldn't that be amazing to just accidentally get knocked up in Paris? Like I would have chosen that if I could have.
Me too.
100%.
Me too. I choose that. I choose that. But I had the opportunity. I had the chance to build a family. Where many women who don't have the means to come up with 15 to 20K out of their pocket to do so, I had that chance. And what I love about the Chick Mission is that they give other women that chance. The second kind of tier of this is when my marriage was over and my embryos were no longer something I could pursue. I had to grieve not only the end of my biological potential to be a mother that way. I mean, it's something you have to face if you're going to move forward. but it really brought so much of the cancer experience that perhaps I hadn't dealt with back.
So, can you tell us a little bit about that? Can you tell us about the grieving process? Can you tell us about what tools you leaned on or how you navigated through this secondary loss?
Yeah, and I'm still navigating it. First and foremost, my job every single day is to speak about my experience so that other people may learn from it, to fundraise so women who need monetary support can preserve their own fertility and stop the clock and make their own choices and not let cancer decide for them. We have 285 women who have frozen their eggs. We have 4 children who've been born from our program that's only 4 years old. Imagine how many more women will be able to follow their family dreams. The average age of our patient is 30. And what I learned from my own cancer experience, you spend 1 year staring at a wall trying to figure out that this happened to you. Another year, especially if you've had chemotherapy, trying to put your body back together. Another year to put your mind back together. And then maybe you'll go find a partner if you don't have one. So all of that chick mission centric work allows me to take my crap sandwich and turn it into something palatable for someone else. I also spend a lot of time with my nieces and nephews, blood and otherwise, and that allows me to soothe my maternal instincts that are so much stronger than I ever thought they were. Yeah. And a friend of mine said to me very recently, as I was lamenting, perhaps I would never be a mother. And she goes, "You mother everybody all the time. From the stereotypical Jewish mother, I cook for 16 when there's only 4 people home. Yeah. I never forget a birthday, an anniversary, your kid's birthday. I treat my friends not like my kids, but I treat them the way I would want to be treated.
Like your priority.
And that allows me to mother in a way. What that means for me moving forward, especially as someone who's dating now, I don't know.
Okay. Oh gosh. So we're on the healing journey. You're finding healing through your work, it sounds like, and by having this tremendous impact on so many other women. And you're now dating, which I think is a whole different podcast episode. But if you were to articulate the dating experience after cancer in a couple sentences, what's that like?
Well, for normal people, you have boundaries. You don't need to show someone your mastectomy scars on your first date if you have them. Yeah. I don't really believe in boundaries. It's interesting. Being in your 40s and dating post-cancer, you learn to say what you need and share your experiences, I think, so quickly. Mm-hmm. I'm imagining that's what it's like in your 40s dating in general. I don't know. It's very new to me.
Don't ask me about dating in your 40s. First, I just turned 40. I have no clue. But it sounds like you're doing it the way that sounds fun, actually.
I'm doing it in the way that is organic to me. Yeah. I'm very upfront about, I had this experience. Also, it's what I do for a living. So it comes up pretty quickly. If you Google me, it's like cancer survivor, if you pay attention, it takes a lot of pressure off any potential partner who doesn't want to have more children. And it weeds out potential partners who want them because that's not something I could do, nor is it something I would ask anyone to give up, to build a relationship. Physically, it's difficult when you have scars. I know we all have scars. I didn't think it was that easy dating in your 20s when you were hot. And there's a song that the chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks, sing, where it's like, everybody wants a new model, but I'm a little bit more traveled.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And you have to be upfront about that too. I mean, no one's perfect, but in being secure, like you said, I made a bold statement. I will never be a mother. In being secure in the truth, it allows me to interact with other people in the world without being wishy-washy or insecure. Yeah. Sure. I held someone's baby who was 9 months old the other day, and I had the pangy pangs.
I know those.
The Chick Mission founder, Amanda Rice and I spent a lot of time together, and we have a lot of conversations about, how the Chick Mission work is healing from our never can be's.
Yeah. Given this complicated journey that you've had with regards to your relationship to fertility and your now proclamation that you will never have a biological family, but also the conversation that we've been having around friends as family, how do you personally define family?
What does family mean to me? It's multi-layered and textured, as you said. I believe the people who make up your family are the people who see you for who you really are, good and bad, treat you the way they want to be treated, and aren't afraid of open dialogue. I believe that conflict is part of daily life. And as long as there's a foundation of love at the very, very base, everything is just a spirited debate. I believe in showing up for when people need you. I believe in showing up for when they don't ask. And at the end of the day, my family are the people who want me to be the best version of myself in exactly how I'm supposed to be it.
I love that. Well, Tracy, it has been such a pleasure to get to know you a little bit through this podcast episode. And thank you so much for spending the time chatting with me and with Stork'd.
Thank you for listening to Stork'd with your host, Julia Carroll. This podcast is changing the conversation around the ways people define and create family. If you like what you hear, please support us by sharing with friends and following on Instagram at Stork'd_podcast. We also always appreciate it when you rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information, visit storkedpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter. That's STORKD podcast.com.
I am thrilled to share and extend a free level 2 subscription to the California Cryobank Donor Catalog. By using the promo code STORK'd, that's STORKD, at cryobank.com, you will receive free access for 90 days, which is an $145 value.